Hello, everyone. Welcome to the second part of the Yellow House, a book discussion in 4 movements, where we'll be discussing movement 2 of Sarah Broom's The Yellow House. I'm Megan Holt. I'm the executive director of One Book One New Orleans. And for those of you new here, I'm just going to give you a quick recap about what One Book is all about. So as you know, One Book One New Orleans picks one book every year. And we encourage everyone in the city to read the same book at the same time, with the idea that we're going to grow stronger as a community through a shared reading experience. But in doing that, we have to recognize that approximately 27% of our adults here in the city of New Orleans are functionally illiterate, which means that maybe if they do have some level of literacy, their lives are made harder by that literacy level every day. There's some obstacle that they face. So if we're really going to be One Book, One New Orleans, we have to make sure that we are reaching those folks who would normally be outside of a community of readers. So we develop a curriculum around the book every year, and with the help of a network of community partners, we get the book into adult education programs, adults who are preparing for the high set, adult ESL programs, incarceration education programs for both women and teens. And then we also get the book into the ears of the blind and print handicapped through a partnership with WRBH Reading Radio. We get the book into the hands of those who can read but maybe can't afford to buy a new book by making sure every branch of the New Orleans Public Library has at least 3 copies. And last but not least, we make sure that we do some amazing community programming with another network of partners. So right now that programming is virtual. You are part of it tonight. Thank you for being here for this book discussion. We hope to see you in person soon. But in the meantime, without further ado, I'm going to turn it over to Liz Granite and Latoya Taylor, who are going to lead us in tonight's discussion. And also, if you like what you're seeing, go to YouTube and hit that subscribe button, because we are 6 people away from having the 100 subscriptions we need for a custom URL. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Megan. Thanks for this opportunity to be here and talk about the Yellow House. And I'm going to turn it over to my partner here, Latoya Taylor, who's going to get us started with setting a context in which we all feel empowered to share and set some group agreements.
Hi, I'm Latoya, and I'll be running the slideshow today. So please put your messages or questions in the chat, and feel free to come off of mute or keep your video on, because we love to see faces too. So one of the things we wanted to do to get started was come up with 3 group agreements for the book club tonight. We've gotten the ball rolling with the first group agreement, which is to keep the conversation focused on the book. So at this time, like if you guys have 2 more suggestions, I will add them and we can get going. Don't be shy. We're all friends. Oh.
I would like this evening to be fun. If we could all agree to fun, I'm all about it. Does that sound okay to everybody? Can we agree to fun?
Agreed.
All right.
Let's see, we have one in the chat. Treating one another with respect and valuing all voices. I love that. Everyone in agreement with that one?
Absolutely.
Okay, everybody, we have our group agreements. So now we'll start with the questions. Back over to you, Liz.
All right, thanks so much, Latoya. So tonight we get to discuss movement 2 of the Yellow House, which is divided into 4 movements. We have The World Before Me, The Grieving House, Water, and Do You Know What It Means? Investigations. And The World Before Me explores Sarah's family's history before she was born. She's the baby in a family of 12 children. And we leave movement 1 at her sister Deborah's wedding reception at the Yellow House. Simon Broom, Sarah's father, is still alive at the time. And it's during that outdoor reception when guests start coming in and out of the house to use the restroom and whatnot, that Ivory May, her mother, her shame about the house starts to take shape. And the movement ends with the line, "Here came the shifty settling of shame." Movement 2 opens with 3 quotes, and the first of which by poet laureate Tracy K. Smith, I'd like to read to you because I really enjoy the context that it sets for the rest of the movement, and it really carries throughout the book as well. "Strange house we must keep and fill, house that eats and pleads and kills, house on legs, house on fire, house infested with desire, haunted house, lonely house." We start movement 2 by meeting Sarah when she's 5 years old. She's playing in the bathroom where her father, Simon, passed away. And as she says it, where Daddy went quiet. And chapter 4 begins with Sarah describing her world as a child, which she refers to as 5 points on a map, like 5 fingers spread out on a hand. There was her grandmother's house in St. Rose, the Schwegman supermarket on Gentilly Boulevard, which I love. She says, "It was one of my favorite places to act a fool." And then she later references it in the movement as well, after she's gone away to college and comes back, and it's closed. It's no longer there. We've got the Yellow House on the short end of Wilson Avenue, Pastor Simmons' house church, and then Jefferson Davis Elementary School across Chef Highway, which, you know, we talk about quite a bit, the highway in particular. Some of these locations are described in rich detail in the book, and others not so much. Yet these are what she identifies as her 5 points that make up the world of her growing up. And this whole concept, this resonated with me in a big way. I grew up on Long Island, New York, and my world fit between 2 points or parameters. There was the North Shore and the South Shore. Mom's family lived on the North Shore on the Long Island Sound, and Dad's family and us, we lived on the South Shore on the Great South Bay. And for those not familiar, there are only 15 to 20 miles between those 2 points before you hit water on either side. And I remember, especially as a small child, thinking that like the whole world fit between these 2 bodies of water. And the question that I want to ask, and this one is from the guide, the reading guide in the book, is what are some of the places that you can still inhabit vividly in your mind's eye? Why do you think those stuck and others didn't? And why do you think the points in the author's growing up world stuck with her so strongly? And one place that just right away popped up for me, and it was actually when Sarah was talking about being in the bathroom that nobody else uses with lizards running in and out of the holes, it really brought me back to this place. And for me, that was the Bayberry Beach and Tennis Club, where I spent every summer weekday of my childhood, like from morning to night. And I think in part of its sticking power was it was the first place where I had a sense of agency. Even like at 5, 6 years old, it felt like the adults were like, oh, you know, it's a safe zone. We're here at the beach club, and the kids would roam and do whatever. So like every day was an adventure. And me and the boys would like sneak behind the tennis courts and into the marsh and pretend we were, you know, investigating all the creatures, or we were scientists. We would find holes in the fence and slip into the beach next door. We would build forts under the boardwalk. We even had this little thing of fake money called Bayberry Bucks, where we could buy stuff at the snack stand. And I think that sense of agency and feeling like we had our own little world that was happening simultaneously to the adults, yet it was like they didn't see it, made that just a very special place for me and something that's still very vivid and alive in my mind's eye. So I'd love to hear about what are some of those places for you.
Come off mute if you would like to talk.
Okay, I can. So one of those places, you mean from our personal lives?
Yeah.
I have a quick one, a place growing up, we used to ride our bikes around the neighborhood. And occasionally as we got a little bit older, we'd go a little farther or maybe a little farther. And there was a park that we went to that was a little bit beyond where we were really supposed to be riding our bikes to. And on the side of the park, somebody, or probably older kids or teenagers, had taken all the sticks and leaves and built kind of a little makeshift tent. And there were like remnants of them hanging out in there. And we'd go in there and we'd be like, oh God, let's go look at this place. And I just can clearly remember being in there so well, although I probably only spent, we probably only went in there 2 or 3 times for a few minutes. But for some reason in my mind's eye, I can picture it much better than the street we would drive past a million times, because there was a sense of awe or, wonder, or also maybe we're not doing something we're not supposed to, or excitement.
I definitely feel that excitement about doing something you're not supposed to do. And yeah, like that's part of why that memory is still so fresh. You can feel it.
Yeah, one of the memories for me was growing up, my grandmother lived right next door to us, and she was always on her porch. And it was just like a little tiny porch. Well, now it looks tiny, because it's still there, but growing up, it felt like this like huge porch. But whenever we would come home from school, she would be sitting on the porch. And if we did great for whatever reason, like that morning before school, when we would come home, she would have this old time ice cream maker sitting on the porch. So when we would get home and get off the school bus, if we saw that old time, you had to hand crank it and the ice was on the side of it. It was so exciting because it was like, we're getting ice cream. And whenever she made ice cream, it meant she made a cake also. So yeah, so it was like that porch was like the place. We would come home and there was like a bushel of peas that we had to pick. The porch was the place that in my mind, it's like, this is where my grandmother was. Like if she's on the porch or she needs us to do something, it was always on the porch. It was never like in the house. So that's one that every time I pass that porch, because the home is like falling in and everything, but that porch is like the moment for me where I'm like, oh, that's my grandmother's spot. So that one's really special to me.
In the chat, Megan says, oh man, my mama used to make the best ice cream and I haven't thought about that in years.
Yes, homemade ice cream is the best.
Yeah, I don't know that I've had that. Yeah, I'm thinking about it. I don't remember any ice cream makers in my youth.
I think it was really good because you actually had to put like some work into it. Hi. Yeah, you have to actually crank it. Now you can just plug it in and it'll churn for you. But yeah.
Yeah, there's something satisfying about creating it yourself. How about, does anyone want to speak on why they think those 5 points really stuck with the author in her growing up world?
Those were the things.
What's that? I'm not sure if someone's saying something or someone's unmuted.
I could respond.
Yeah, please.
Those are the limits of her world as a child growing up, the places that she saw and went to all the time. It kind of defined where she was. And as to why those stuck, I don't know. Those were just the places that resonated with her, I guess.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I know. I thought it was interesting that she doesn't really talk at too much length about the house church, which I think she says mom would go when she was feeling more Pentecostal than Catholic. I want to say it was something like that. She doesn't talk at length about Schwegmann's either, other than saying that's where she liked to act a fool and that it was later closed. So yeah, I'm curious about that. Like, why are those the spots? And thinking about all the places that we frequented as children, why do some stick with us more than others?
And I think the places that stick with us as children aren't the places that remain stuck with us as adults.
Ambata in the comments said, I think it's because she spent a lot of time in those places.
Mm-hmm.
So anyone else? Okay, we'll move on to the next question. So in movement 2, we talked, Sarah talked a lot about vision in different ways, how she saw things. And in chapter 5, called 4 Eyes, Sarah received new glasses. But one of the things she mentioned was when she couldn't see, she could ignore the things around her. But once she received her glasses, you know, she couldn't ignore the people in the car and what they were doing and other things in the community. So she stated, I try not to see what is right in front of my face. Sometimes when I want the world to go blurry again, I remove my glasses when passing by these scenes. In this way, I learn to see and to go blind at will. So with that in mind, what are some things you feel people choose not to see about New Orleans or your area if you're not in New Orleans? And did your viewpoint change after reading this book? And as a follow-up question, another question, what do you think about a child that age learning that at her age, you know, to know there are some things you just shouldn't see or mention or pretend you don't see? So you can answer any of those questions.
Yeah, I'd like to speak. My name is Sean. I think for me, I'm from a native of Kenner, Louisiana, but I'm in Minneapolis now. So speaking to her perspective of what's, you know, the question, what are some of the things that people choose not to see about New Orleans? I think a lot of it is the poverty and, you know, the sadness that actually exists there. We do a great job of, you know, trying to minimize those experiences or those, you know, life challenges we have. Yeah, and I lost my thought there, but I'll leave it there.
I think just going off of Sean's point too, I mean, one of the things that Broom talks about a lot in this book is that we choose not to see the East. I mean, it's literally not on some maps of the city or in guidebooks. So this idea of not seeing where she's from reflected in the story of the city. So yeah, I think that goes right along with what Sean just said.
Yeah, I thought that was pretty amazing for a child that young to recognize that, you know, that when I don't want to see, all I have to do is just put on my blinders, take off my glasses and put on my blinders.
But that speaks, that's so profound. If, you know, if that was at a young age that she was able to make that choice, that's, yeah, profound in itself as well for a child.
You know, something else about this girl, when she was growing up, she had all these siblings, but at the same time, she was not really monitored or disciplined very much. She really spent her time the way she wanted to without adult interference. And I saw this quote. In fact, I wrote it down after when I was reading the book, because it seemed to me so characteristic of her growing up, the way she looked and interacted with other people in the house. Does that make any sense?
In the comments, Ambata said, I'm sorry if I'm pronouncing your name wrong. People don't want to see the parts that aren't exciting and tourist friendly. And Shelby stated, another thing we choose not to see, the fate of the city as climate change threatens our coastlines and city life as we know it. We have to live at the mercy of water here, and it gives us life, but it will also someday likely be our downfall.
I think that some things that people choose not to see, one thing is the discrepancy in education. That's always, bothered me. The discrepancy in education between the haves and the have-nots, public and private schools. And I feel like they turn their eyes away and don't deal with that.
I mirror that sentiment as well.
Yeah, very true. And that, of course, gets perpetuated, as certain populations are literally pushed out of school and not given the equal opportunity at an equitable education. It's just not setting them up to win in the future. And Megan says, Janet, yes, and even the system of applying to public school is very, very time consuming and not transparent. Yes, oh my goodness. It takes so much time and dedication to get your child into a decent school. And there are working parents who literally do not have the time or resources to dedicate to that. Yeah, it's a real struggle. All right, so moving on to our next question, which is perfect for following the theme of vision. In chapter 6, Elsewheres, Broom writes, "We take photos because we do not want to remember wrong." And she describes a handful of photos of herself from the start of her teenage years and talks about how 1991 through 1996 was defined by the coming and going of family members. And as someone with 9 siblings, I know that feeling of the coming and going and how important it can be to have that that memory, that photo of that moment frozen in time. Here we are, though, 2 decades later in 2021, when the way we take photos, the way we share photos, the way we preserve photos has been completely transformed by digital media. So now in this reality, do you think that photos tell the true story of history? And have you changed the way that you take photos over the last 15 years? How about social media? Has that changed the way that you take or you view photos?
I think photos can tell a portion of history, and kind of my answer is going to be a little bit of all of it. I do think I've changed the way I take photos over the last 15 years. And that's mainly because I started out not liking the way I looked in photos. I was like, I don't like this picture deleted. I don't want the picture. And as I've gotten older and connected with more family members, I'm like, I wish I had photos of my early life, the places I visited. I was caught up on the wrong things. And now I'm like, I wish I had that so I can actually tell the story of where I've been, where I'm, who I've met, friends that I've connected with over the years. Social media is, I have a love-hate relationship with social media, primarily because most people will take a photo that's where they're happy when deep down inside they're really not happy. So if you're just basing this photo off of the way that they are feeling at that moment, it's not going to be an accurate portrait of what was happening at that moment. So they can tell the true story if you're being honest in the photos, but most people will not take a photo when they're like really in that moment.
Yeah, I mirror that sentiment. And I think, yeah, before social media, I think photos were more, the reason why most people didn't take photos before social media is because people are actually in the moment, versus now, like they are in the awareness of the moment. So they try to project either the facade or the accolades that come with taking whatever type of photos for, the benefit of social media. But yeah, I prefer, living in the moment. And I grew up in a family where my father was a photographer. So I naturally had the bug. So I was always kind of mindful of like taking photos, but again, never photos of myself.
Also, hey everyone, this is Malik. I also to put in context that in the time period that Sarah is talking about, New Orleans is the murder capital of America. We have a saying in the hood that if you survive 1995 as a Black person in New Orleans, you're a whole gangster out here in these streets, because everybody was dying and everybody was getting shot in 1995. So they say if you came off the porch in 1995 and you survived, you got some hustle in you. So taking pictures of people, there's actually a veteran photographer who started taking photos in second lines and in bars. His name is Polo. And Polo literally talks about how he has so many people who are deceased in his photos, and he was able to capture those moments where now people are coming to him saying, you have a picture of my uncle, you have a picture of my brother. And people are running to him like, that's the only picture I have of my dad since Katrina. So he has these special, unique moments pre-social media. And he has probably one of the most extensive archives of Black culture before Hurricane Katrina in the second lines and in the projects and et cetera. So these moments was very important where you went to a dance or a bar because you honestly did not know what was going to happen the next day. And I think that is very telling when she talk about these moments with these photos. And I think now people take pictures, social media, like Latoya was saying, for the image or for a reaction versus taking photos to capture the moment. But they're really taking photos for the reactions.
True.
Bada stated the story behind the photos tell more about the history. That's so true.
And Megan added, Polo Silk's book is Pop That Thing, and you can contact him on Instagram to get it. And I just want to say thank you, Malik, for providing that historical context, because yeah, that makes all those photos from that time that much more precious. And I mean, what I'm thinking about in this, about how photos can tell the true story, is like, how can they tell the true story anymore when we have face filters and all these things that distort the reality of what we're looking like? I have personally never used a face filter for that reason. It freaks me out. I don't want that to be the norm. I'm a human being. I am aging. I am getting wrinkles, and I am embracing that. And it's just interesting for me to think of in the future, when future generations get to look back, how they will interpret this and what their understanding of history will be based on the media that we leave behind when we're doing it for the gram versus actually being in the moment,
Yeah, I think another thing is the technology has changed so much. So back in the day, you had a camera, you took the photo, it might be 2 weeks before you found out what the photo looked like. But now it's like, okay, let's take 80 pictures and I'm only going to show this one. That's the only one I'm going to save. But back then it was, this is what was going on in that moment. I have one picture, that's it.
So
That
true.
was it.
You had to be very calculated with the amount of photos you took.
And
Right.
when you're looking at those older photos, you really got to dig and look into them deeper. I think now, because we can frame it better, we could be like, this is what I want you to be looking at in this photo. Whereas some of the older ones, you had to be like, let me look in here and see what's in this photo.
And kind of like what Liz was saying, it makes me sad sometimes when I see the pictures and they're so posed with that same expression in every single picture that I see, so that they're not going to know what they really look like. I mean, the spontaneous pictures of laughing and fun and the silly pictures. Like, I really have no idea what my friend's daughter really looks like, because of that same expression, the little duck face every time, Yeah, it just makes me sad because I think they're erasing their history.
Shelby brings up a good point here. To Liz's point about filters, there is currently a campaign on social media to eliminate facial filters for the reason of the harm it can elicit to change a person's actual facial features and enforce harmful beauty ideals, as statistics of self-hatred in teens are on the rise. Yes, absolutely. I, for one, just want to normalize people looking like people, and aging as we do. And when I think about photography as a source of information on history, it's those candid photos that you I guess you could rely on more accurately, and perhaps Malik could speak to this, to tell the story, versus the posed photos that, sure, we see a proliferation of because of social media, getting all the angles just right, getting that lighting just right, having the perfect backdrop. You can actually find tours to go to Instagram photo spots around New Orleans. So it doesn't, I don't know, I just, again, question how our media will be interpreted by future generations, and who knows what they'll be doing.
Well, I do think that we are living in a time of a level of narcissism. However, I do think that that's why it's always good, whether it be a company function, a family function, whether you designate a person or hire a photographer, because a real photographer is not looking for the still photo. A real photographer is looking for a special moment, a special shot that you may not even realize that they're taking the photo. And that's the photo that they're actually looking for. So we always talk about the eye and having the eye and keeping your eyes sharp. And actually sometimes, even when I don't, actually I have my camera with me, because one of my mentors, Gus Bennett, told me, Malik, as a photographer, you should always have your camera on you. And he's right. Like, sometimes when I look at certain things, I'm looking at a photo, and people may not, they're wondering why I'm staring at them. It's because I'm framing the photo in my brain. So I think it's important just to allow people to, like you say, Liz, have those natural, candid moments and not be worried about the glam of it, because there's beauty in everyday situations. And sometimes we miss that, and we're trying to glamorize every situation.
And before we move on, Megan says, my favorite pics from my wedding are not posed at all. They're all candid shots. Ambata says, now we are documenting experiences versus life.
Wow, that's profound.
Like, wow, that's a good statement.
Yes.
You have to put that one, type that one out. Save that one. That's a good one. Okay, so on the next question, I love this question. So in the story, Sarah Broom talks about how she was Monique for like the beginning parts of her life. And then when it was time to go to school, her mother said, these people are gonna call you Sarah. So later on in the story, on the subject of names, she mentioned upon returning home after her first year of college in Texas, Sarah wrote in a notebook, "When I'm in New Orleans, I feel like Monique. At UNT, I was Sarah." So do you have different names depending on where you are or who you interact with? What aspects of your personality do these different names represent? And how does having different names or titles, as the author says, affect how you move through the world? And I'm not going to start off with this one because I think I have like maybe 5 nicknames from different people, which is amazing since I have a pretty simple name. But depending on how people refer to me, I know exactly what period of my life that I met this person. So I was in the Army. So a lot of those people, they still call me Taylor. So if you refer to me as by my last name, then I know, okay, you were from the Army those years. None of my family calls me Latoya. They always shorten it. Every job, I end up with a different nickname. It's either LT or boss lady at one job. So, and I noticed that I do take on a different personality depending on where how they refer to me. So if they refer to me as Taylor, I don't know, I think I automatically kind of straighten up a little bit because the Army comes out a little bit. So yeah, so I love that question because I have a lot of nicknames. So what about you? Anybody else?
Yeah, I have, my mother had 2 best friends. One was Janet and one was Lola. Sadly, she named me after Janet and I wanted to be Lola. So some of my closest friends, do call me Lola. And when I evacuated to Florida after the storm, my friends over there, I went more by Lola. And yes, those are 2 different personalities. Yeah.
I'm curious to know how you would define those personalities because Sarah talks about the name Sarah as being the contained proper one and at odds with Monique, who is the raw, lots of space to move around in version. So tell me about who's Janet and who's Lola.
Oh boy. Okay. Well, Janet is kind of like a Karen. I mean, it's like that old name, that you don't hear anymore. And Lola, that's fun, right? So when I'm out with my girlfriends having fun, then it's Lola. But work and everything else also serious, then it's Janet.
I feel that. Thank you for sharing. We have a comment here from Shelby in the chat. It says, "My given name is Shelby. When I lived and worked as a teacher in Israel, my students and friends called me by my other given name from birth, my Hebrew name, which is Shira. It blew my students' minds that I would have a Hebrew name as an American, though this is a common practice. My Hebrew name of Shira allowed me to feel like I belonged in a community halfway across the world with which I shared a culture, but not a birthplace or upbringing." That's beautiful.
I kind of have a similar experience in that situation. Y'all can hear me? Yeah. So when it was several years ago, maybe about 8 years ago, I had issues of trying to get a job, like a job interview, just job interview itself. And you see how my name is spelled CEMAL. It's actually pronounced Jamal. And so I created a nickname Jim, try to get job interviews, and my number of job interviews actually went up dramatically.
I actually have quite a few friends that had to do that. They changed their name for job applications, or they just use their initials.
Oh, no.
And the author talks about that I think it's her first day of kindergarten when her mom says, when those people ask your name, tell them Sarah. And she notes that those people is usually a term for, well, it's always a term for strangers, and it's usually white and they're usually men. And it's the people who, I think it was decide how the world works, or I think it was decide how the world works. And then she later talks about realizing the reason for her mom naming her as she did, like her mother understood the politics of naming in a racially divided city. I feel that one a lot. My identity is kind of funny too. I have a Hebrew name as well. And I almost had like a very Italian sounding name. My father wanted to name me Apollonia, and my mom was like, let's not saddle our Sicilian, Italian, American daughter with a name associated with the Godfather. That might make things really hard for her. So they went with a nice Hebrew name, and my Elishiva or Elizabeth, yet nobody calls me that. And my mom thought Elizabeth was cool because it had like 20 different nicknames, so I could pick my own name. So as a child, I like went through the list. And like knowing that we were doing this discussion, I called my mom to talk about this because I was like, well, what did you call me when I was a baby? And it was Lizzie. And when I go back to the island, that's what everybody knows me as. I'm Lizzie. It's always Lizzie. And it wasn't until like, I actually started going to high school, I think, was when other people started calling me Liz. The other thing is like there are 10 kids in my family, and there's like a big divide between the first 5 and then the rest of them. And the first 5, my father never, ever calls us by our names, ever. We go, like, if we're in his presence, we have our dad given names. So we go from being Elsie, Gina, Bianca, Elizabeth, and Daniel to LG, Biz, Tizzy, and Doodle. That's it. That's what he calls us. And I kind of lean into it, like Tizzy is fun, she's expressive, she's loving, she's playful. Yet that's the only time and place where I'm Tizzy is with my dad.
So it's interesting to know.
No, go ahead.
So it's interesting to know that in different places and spaces, we go through these defining moments or redefining ourselves as individuals. But sometimes, I try to introduce different people in my life to different compartments, whether it be if you just know me in one capacity, trying to introduce them to tour guide Malik, or making sure they, so you can arrive as much as possible as your whole authentic self, and just trying to merge. Because yes, family give you a name, your friends give you a name, but who understand you in your totality and as your whole self, whether it be, I remember we went to my nephew's graduation and they mentioned him being a jokester. It was like, you don't talk, but clearly he don't talk around us. So it's just really trying to encourage people to be their whole authentic self at all times, so we can really see the manifestations or the gifts that are you. Because some people have so many different gifts and talents that we never get to see because we don't want to put them in this daughter bracket or this son bracket or this you're the smart one bracket, and there are so much other things that they are capable of.
Yeah, having a nickname is almost like just having a real alternate personality. I was in a room once with the lady that worked with Beyonce, and she was saying how Beyonce is, she's very introverted, but when she gets on stage, she turns into Sasha Fierce. So it's like, that's when that other personality comes out and she can be whoever she wants to be. And I'm like, yeah, sometimes I feel like that when it's, okay, Latoya's got problems, I don't really want to deal with Latoya, then I'm going to go be LT. I'll go be somebody else for a minute. It's still me, but I'm going to tap into that other side for a little while.
It might be an interesting experiment if we all kind of have our different personalities that we lean to in certain situations. It might be an interesting experiment if we're going into a certain situation that we know we bring personality A, to say, you know what, let's try to be personality C in the A spot today and see what happens. I don't know, maybe it'd be fun.
I do think I have to do that sometimes. When I know I need discipline, I do go to Taylor. I'm like, okay, the army has to come out. I need to buckle down, focus. I have to tap back into that.
Elizabeth is only on the scene if the government is involved.
So we have some great comments in chat. Okay.
Oh, yeah.
All right. So let's see. Defining oneself. Oof. I'm getting sweaty just thinking about it. So in chapter 9, Distances, Sarah is back from college and she's working for the summer. And well, I don't know that she's working. She's in the French Quarter though, and she's taking a lot of pictures. And she writes about how she defines herself based on the mythology of New Orleans and how she allows other people's perception of the city to transfigure her in whatever she is needed to be at that time. She talks about I can cook because I can hold my liquor because I am interesting because. And continuing with that theme of photographs, she's taking pictures throughout the summer to send to friends, and realizes these are all pictures of the French Quarter that do not in any way inform someone of my life in New Orleans East or what my growing up was like. And yet that was the narrative that she crafted about herself. She says, I did not yet understand the psychic cost of defining oneself by the place where you are from. Have you defined yourself by your location, and did it help or hurt you throughout your life? For me, this is like a hard no. I could not wait to get off the island, because those 15 to 20 miles with water on both sides, like by the time I got a car, it just felt really restrictive. I did not want to be there. And while there were a lot of great things about my growing up, I was, I guess, not in alignment with like the social norms or just the overall really straining to call it culture of New Orleans or of Long Island. So for me, it was like, get me out of here. And I left right away to go to college, still in New York, yet off the island. And then I went up to Maine, and then I went like literally as far as I could in the continental United States away from the island. I went out to Los Angeles. And that question, where are you from? I hated answering I'm from New York, because people would go, oh, the city? No, I'm about 40 minutes east of there. The conversation ends. So it was that same thing with being from New York, conjured this image for people of like, surrounded by skyscrapers and in the mix. And it's like, no, it wasn't really like that. Like, yeah, I started going there as a young teenager, yet that's not what my community and my neighborhood were like. So yeah, I never wanted to be defined by that place. I couldn't wait to leave. And I stand by that decision.
Recent calls.
Would anybody else like to share about if you have defined yourself by your location? Did it help or hurt you throughout your life? Or do you maybe have an experience more like mine where you don't really identify with the place that you're from?
So I guess I like to speak on this part. Yeah, growing up in Kenner, which is like right outside of New Orleans, it was always this experience for me by me attending school in New Orleans at St. Aug. I grew to love the city, my family roots were from Vacherie. So I always had that, like, kind of this weird spider web of connection to New Orleans in itself. But as a kid, kind of mirroring your sentiment, Liz, is like I always wanted to get away just because I saw the opportunities for myself were like limited. So again, the first opportunity that I had to leave, I took it. But in going away, New Orleans, I think for most New Orleanians or people from the area, is like you, no matter how far you go away from home, you always want to be a part of it and you kind of mirror it to some degree. So for me, it was kind of this thing. I wanted to get away, but I didn't want it to leave me. To the point where, like, being in Minneapolis, I had to kind of change my dialect in the aspect of like communicating better with the environment that I was in, the culture. But yeah, so it's kind of this love hate, or kind of like push pull to that regards. But New Orleans in itself kind of definitely, I think, defines me at the core. The culture of Louisiana and my Creole roots. From Vacherie, and yeah, from Vacherie to New Orleans. So definitely have this sense of identity and belonging to that place.
I think mine was more like yours in that I could not wait to get out of rural Alabama. Just couldn't wait. I was ready to go the day I turned 18. It's time. Still went just 2 hours south of, where I grew up for college, but still. What was wild though is when I got out of the state and I would say to folks outside of the South, like, oh, I'm from Alabama. And they go, well, where's your accent? Or, oh, but you're so educated. And so it was like, I never really defined myself by where I was from, but like, it was really interesting to see what people put on me by hearing where I was from. And I think that Broom touches on that a lot in the book as well. Oh, no, you don't have an accent. What? You're not really from there, are you? I had a college professor one time ask me if I had been educated in Alabama because my education was apparently too good.
And don't feel surprised by that, because that actually was I went to the University of St. Thomas, and I also kind of had that same like feedback from some of the professors. And that was another weird dynamic, like how I guess Southerners were less intelligent, which was, something that I just didn't see would be present and, at that point in time, but it existed.
Yeah, I think my story is more like Megan's. I was from a small town in Mississippi, and I could not wait to get out. I mean, as soon as I turned 18, I was like, okay, I'm out. And then once I was in the Army and started traveling around, whenever someone would ask me where I was from, it actually turned into almost like a badge of honor to say I'm from the South. Because I was mainly on the East Coast, and it was just like, oh, you're from the South. And everybody wanted to talk to me because, I don't know, at the time they said I was country. I had a really strong accent. And now, it's like I've lived so many other places that I'm kind of like, I don't know where I'm from. So now I enjoy identifying from Mississippi now, because I'm like, okay, now I at least have something I can say, hey, I'm from the South. So I define myself more by the South than Mississippi, but it's still a location. Okay, moving on to the next question. In the last chapter of Movement 2, titled 1999, it begins with this quote from Zora Neale Hurston, who I love her. There are years that ask questions and years that answer. 1999 did both. What questions did 1999 ask the author, and what questions did it answer? What questions did 2020 ask you, and what questions did it answer? So I know everybody should have something at least for 2020.
Yeah, I feel like I could probably talk all night about those questions and answers. First, though, with Sarah, I think it was a really big shift. I believe it was when she referred to it was the last time she would face poverty. She wrote something like that in her personal notebook that she retells in the book. And it was when she had gone from never going outside of Louisiana to visiting 8 different cities within that school year from 1998 to 1999, and that was when her life in New York City started to take shape too. And that was also the passing of her friend Alvin. So I think like um, asking those life questions, you know, what am I doing with my life? What am I here to do? Where should I go? You know, what's the path for me? I think got asked and answered in a lot of ways during that year and during that trip home in particular.
So as a follow-up for everyone in the audience, is there another year that stood out for you that was, you know, that key moment for you?
Yeah, I think for me, I don't know if I'm actually answering this question correctly, but for some reason, 1994, and it speaks to the point of Latour's comment about just the amount of violence that was going on in New Orleans and like kind of crossing that stage for graduation. It felt like this rites of passage in a sense, and you know, it kind of left me with this like accomplishment, but like this great void ahead of me. But knowing that I was kind of leaving, well, at that point, yeah, I was aware I was leaving Louisiana, New Orleans at that time, that it felt hopeful and that I could kind of come back at some point later in life to, you know, like, you know, be more of a whole person to be able to come back to New Orleans. So yeah, 94 for me seems like that year for me.
I think my year was more recent. It was 2017. And that was the year I felt like a lot was just happening in my life. And that was the moment when I just stopped to say, like, am I actually happy, or am I just existing? And I realized like I wasn't. So at the end of 2017, I actually decided to quit my job and said I wasn't gonna die unhappy. I wasn't gonna stay in a job that wasn't making me happy. It was time to figure out. So so for that year, 2017, it it made me question who I was as a person, and I didn't have the answer. So by the end of 2017, I said, I have to find the answer. So that was that year for me. I'm kind of like in the book, it's just so many things happening and just starting to say like, no more, like, this is it.
That's powerful, Latoya. Thank you for sharing that.
Hi, this is Felicia. You hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Hi. Oh, yes. So I would say a year that really defined a important chapter in my life was actually 2019, a recent year. And that year was the year I actually moved here to New Orleans. And for me, it was the defining moment because I moved from Atlanta to New Orleans. And for me, it was more of an adventure, and moving to work and be in a place where it's so much culture, so much more friendliness, in my opinion, here in New Orleans, and also being able to do what I love and also to be able to meet new people and learn so much more about this wonderful city. So 2019 was a nice and great defining moment for me.
That's beautiful, Felicia. Thank you for sharing that as well. As far as questions that 2020 asked, I know I was zeroing in really on what matters most to me. What are my highest values? What does living an authentic, fulfilling life look like, despite any circumstances beyond my control? Like, with what I have, what can I do with that? And it was actually the first time that I went back home, which was actually up to where my mom is now in Maine. It was the first time I've gone back home for any length of time since I left in 2005. So that was pretty big, just to be like, you know what, family actually matters a lot to me. Maybe I should go spend some time with them. And it felt like, although it was not a situation we wanted to be in, it did force me to ask some hard questions and discover those answers and make changes within my life that actually are a reflection of what my values are. So I won't say that it felt good going through that process, yet it feels good now being on the other side of it and being like, wow, I really love my life and I enjoy the things I get to spend my time doing. And I'm happy I took that opportunity to ask those hard questions.
Okay. Anyone else want to go back and revisit any question? If you've thought of something else you want to answer, feel free to do so.
I kind of wanted to ask anybody else if the chapter Four Eyes really resonated with them. Was anyone else not aware of their vision problems until about halfway through their childhood? Is that just me? It's like when she started describing how she didn't see things that were right in front of her face, guys, I didn't know there were individual leaves on trees until I was 8 when I got my first set of glasses. Like, the narrative in my head was they grew in clumps and then broke apart when they hit the ground, because that's how I saw them. I saw them clumped together high up. And then, yeah, she did. And then I saw them broken apart on the ground. So I'm like, oh, they must break. And it was really wild to like think about the narrative in my blind little mind versus like what was actually there. And I was like, did anyone else experience that? That chapter was like, oh, that's me.
I think for me, for the longest time, they thought I wanted to sit in the front of the classroom because I was smart. It turned out I couldn't see. Nobody knew that.
Yeah, for me, it wasn't seeing, it was actually hearing. So I've always had trouble hearing. And so when I was younger, I would learn to read lips. And so when I just didn't want to know what somebody was saying, I just didn't read lips. And, I just didn't see it. It's like, I don't hear it. And if I did overhear something, I would just tell people, I have hearing problems. I didn't hear it. And that was my, fallback.
And I mirrored that as well. I was born with fluid on the ears, and I had up until about 5, probably 4 years old, fluid on the ears. So I was hearing words like mumbled or underwater. So yeah, my speech was very awkward at that age. But yeah, it quickly corrected itself once I had surgery and speech therapy. But I definitely empathize with you on that one.
I feel like there's a whole book out there somewhere, just like people talking about how they saw and heard and experienced the world differently as kids because no one caught physical things about their minds and bodies. Yeah, that book is not today though. Today, this is the book. This virtual background's killing me, y'all.
Awesome. Well, I want to thank everybody for participating, for being here, for sharing so openly and authentically. And I think part of the magic of this book is that it does invite us to reflect on our own histories, our family's histories, our stories, all of it. It's an interactive book, is what it feels like to me. I know we've got another event coming up, so we have 2 more discussions on the book. Our next one will be, oh, awesome, on Thursday, June 10th for Movement 3, and then we've got Thursday, August 19th for Movement 4. And between now and then, we've got a whole bunch of events coming up as well, including next week. So next week, we have reflections from Bard Early College New Orleans students on value and place. So the students, high school students, got this assignment to make a case for value, to define value, and make a case for why a particular location is valuable. And again, that's something that comes up repeatedly in this book. That's going to be next Wednesday, the 21st at 6 p.m. You can tune in on our YouTube channel or on our Facebook page, One Book, One New Orleans, to stream it from there. No registration required.
You all.
And I want to give a special shout out to those folks who are joining us from outside of New Orleans. It's just really special. It's really special to know that we're having this conversation all across the country. And you know, Sean, for you in particular, thanks for holding it down up there.
Yeah.
You know, thanks for representing.
And I'm trying to come back home as soon as possible. I've been away for too long, but yeah, the book was definitely a connection with me, just in the aspect of, like, in my childhood, going out to the East, hanging out with friends, you know, going to French Quarters, and yeah, every place in between, from Vacherie to yeah, New Orleans East was kind of like my home at the time. So very fond memories.
Well, hopefully we'll be welcoming you back soon. Thank you for being here on the talk tonight.
Thank you guys for having me. And yeah, I really enjoyed myself.